do this.
All right, here we are. So this is a new day for the Cannabpreneur. We are entertaining discussions in partnership with our guests this afternoon with Saint.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. So
Hello.
thank you for coming onto the show, Saint.
You're welcome.
You and I have had multiple conversations now, and we were pretty much on the same page from the moment that we began talking about cannabis. You're the only cannabis operator I've spoken to who has the same kind of vision that I do, who understands the spirit of the legislation. So now that we're beginning a discussion of adult use cannabis, I thought this would be a good time to bring someone who literally has boots on the ground to discuss the legislation, because previously my business partner and I,
Right.
Cornell, we've been going through it, and the whole purpose is and the whole intention of my doing this is to explain to the world that this legislation is not above your head. You don't need a law degree. You don't need a graduate degree to understand this. If you are a reasonably intelligent person, you can begin to digest this legislation.
And it also gives us an opportunity to get out of the hypothetical and into the actual real-world practical application.
Indeed.
That's right. So we were initially the first episode we did. I wanted to call it the two joint, the two joint, because I smoke two joints before I read the statute. Like the song says.
Yeah.
My business partner Cornell is straight edge. So now that I have another person here, that is exactly what we are going to do. We are going to smoke a fat one.
Yes. And like y'all know, I'm not mad at it. Just don't do it anymore.
He just doesn't do it anymore.
Probably good enough.
But we're gonna
loves, respects, and nurtures the plant.
So we're gonna get into that. But let's light it up. Let's get into this, man. Let's do it.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Enjoy yourself.
Cheers. And I invite the audience to do more or less the.
Feel free to spark one up for liberty.
So just to recapitulate a little bit, we're getting into adult use cannabis here. We wrapped up our discussions about the essentially the government structure, Cannabis Board, the Office of Cannabis Management, and the advisory committee, the State Advisory Committee. We're skipping medical cannabis. It is relevant to the discussion of adult use cannabis in one area, which is actually what you brought up to me, that article from the Harlem Business Alliance,
Yes.
where they were saying that, talk about that a little bit.
Basically, their attitude was that the game was kind of rigged because the people who were already in, the big money people who were already in the medical marijuana business were going to be the first ones in line when it came time to getting the various licenses that the MRTA.
Correct, because and that's actually a reasonable concern. The medical industry already has, their licensing application fees were $300,000, I believe. Right? Is that right?
It's that number up to there.
Mm-hmm.
$300,000, like about 500.
What happened to the ashtray? Oh, thank you.
But I mean,
So they
I'm designated ashtray guy.
so they are positioned, presumably, to just control the marketplace. If that were,
So that was a legitimate, and as we discussed, that's a legitimate concern. However, as we also discussed, this was an article written by people who hadn't actually read through the statute.
and it was actually, we discussed it and brought it up before we read the provisions that specifically address that. So while we are skipping the articles and sections that deal specifically with medical cannabis, we are in adult use cannabis. It spells out the certain limitations for the medical industry to dominate the marketplace.
Right.
But that's spelled out in this section, and we're going to get into it right now.
When you look at it, that would make sense. Medical has been in the game since the beginning, even when it's been under the shadow. So they've already been setting up their business model, and
and that was the fear, and that was the tone of the Harlem Business Alliance article. Was that, come on, these guys, they already got stockpiles of cash, they already got legitimacy with the government and the various licensing agencies. So of course the obvious assumption would be the way that American business and society tends to go, that they would just jump the line and be the first ones ahead.
Right.
Of course.
And that was kind of my attitude as well, until we started parsing through the actual MRTA, which is why that's not the only reason why I agreed to be part of this, but that's why I consider what we're doing here in going through it, article by article and section by section, to be of value to the people out there. Because, look, and as I said, and we said this last episode, stay cynical. I'm not saying don't stay cynical, because what we want to do is we want to hold their feet to the fire. Because even as we read through this stuff, that's just words on paper. I don't believe nothing until I see how it actually plays out in the real world.
Well, and actually, this is another reason why I'm excited to bring on Saint, because he appreciates our discussions around bringing all of the marijuana operators together as a class for the purposes of collective bargaining.
I love it when you say that. That's very important.
Because money is power, okay? But you know what's more powerful than money? People.
Yeah,
and that's what, what did you say money really is? It's the...
Money is the exchange of value between two or more human beings.
Okay, so...
And the exchange of energy, ultimately, that value is just a conceptual receptacle for that energy.
Right. Yeah. Right. So by coming together as a class, that's one of the ways that I think we're going to protect ourselves. The other way we protect ourselves is through radical transparency. Yeah. And actually, I almost forgot. I sometimes...
say that one again.
Radical transparency. So I sometimes begin or end our discussions with a poem, or we did an episode where I quoted Oscar Wilde. I think there's a passage from Isaiah that I want to read. Okay, just to give a little historical background.
Let's get it.
Jerusalem in the time and Israel at the time of Isaiah was dealing with its own internal political conflicts, and they were dealing with international conflicts, and ultimately they did get invaded by Babylon, and the bulk of them went into captivity. And the conclusion is a very sad story. Mm-hmm. But before that happened, Isaiah was essentially speaking to a similar type of, there was a lot of change going on. And what ultimately happened, I think, was very sad. I hope what happens now is not as sad. And
Indeed.
But there is one passage that I wanted to read, and it's short, and I think it speaks directly to the provisions that we're about to get into. Okay. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean. Put away the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Rebuke the oppressor. Defend the fatherless. Plead for the widow. Come now, and let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they shall be as wool. If you are willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, you shall be devoured by the sword. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Now, I don't think anybody, marijuana operator, who fails to...
of course, I was about to say, you needed that, right? I was just actioning it for you.
Well, okay, but to put a little context here, I don't, he's saying, be devoured by the sword. If you don't do what I'm saying, or what we're saying...
You're talking about transparency.
Yeah, but I don't think you're going to, be devoured by the sword.
Of course not.
It's not like that.
But you're not going to reap the potential benefits that are there.
You will vanquish self. That's what it's speaking about. It's like, if you're not in the transparency space with your narrative being clear and sound, and known, and has these little hidden areas... That's going to be the snipe. That's going to be the snare.
That's going to be the snare. But also, I think what the legislature is asking for, what the government is asking for, is essentially what Isaiah said. And you're going to see. It. I really think this is a fascinating piece of legislation. I gotta say, I really think this is, I gotta say, I love this statute. I think it reads to me like poetry. Okay. I think it's worthy of.
It was well worked on.
Yeah. And the thing that getting into the way that we have been doing this episode. I mean, I'm perfectly capable of reading it through myself, but I have intentionally let Sean do the reading. So in these episodes, this is my first time hearing it.
Right. I've studied it. You guys have not, just to be clear to the audience. Right.
And I think it was the second episode when it got into the point where they were talking about how they would examine it. It might have been the second or third episode. It doesn't really matter. Where in 2023, they're going to review how the licenses are distributed, and if they find that they have not been equitably distributed as according to the statute, that they're going to redistribute things. And I was like, at that point, I was like, hold, wait a minute. So they're saying, we're not just going to intend for things to be equitably distributed.
Absolutely.
We are writing in the act itself that's what's gonna happen.
Well-
and if the guys with money jump the line, we're gonna say, sorry, son, no, that's not what we're doing here.
And there's actually, while you're going to see, and I'm perhaps I shouldn't even say as much as I'm saying about it. We should just get into it. But but they are also putting pressure on the social and economic equity applicants to do the right thing, and they're reviewing. You have to reapply.
This is what you fought for.
You have to reapply for the license every 2 years, and if you can't demonstrate that you're doing the right thing, as we're going
Because it's
to
an audit, so they want to see where the business has been as well.
Right,
Exactly.
and they want to see if are you contributing to the community? Are you making this about something more than just your own?
This is why the
It's
class is important.
Yes.
Because then we're all coming together and saying, well, we're keeping deliverables because we are operating in the same state. We're all sharing clientele to some degree. So we should have some kind of standard. And that means that annually, like once you start getting in that schedule, it flows.
And to your point earlier, when you mentioned, because Sean brought up, radical transparency, and I was thinking of that, to be honest, from the perspective of the government or from our operation being radically transparent. But you flipped it, it's like, no, that's also us, the vendors, being radically transparent.
That's right.
And I
That's
really
right.
appreciate that distinction.
That's what I've done, if I may, before we start. That's what I've done in the model of my company, not just because of being classically trained and technically trained in culinary arts, but understanding that even when it comes down to when we're getting a cup of water, the delivery has to be sound. It has to be in a clean cup. It has to be right, and that's not hard to do. And what it results in is a relationship between you and the person consuming.
Yes.
Anything else beyond that is the cream.
Well, that's also why we're creating what we've called the five-borough social,
FBC.
the FBC, the five-borough social and economic equity. Excuse me,
Five-Borough Social Equity Alliance.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I got a little.
Shout out
That's
to
all right.
shout out to cannabis. We love you. we love you.
Yeah, this,
we are joking.
There's a little bit of indica.
It puts the in cannabis.
yeah, we put the
Yeah, right.
So
I love that. I love that.
That's
so-
it.
So let's get started with this. All right. So so this is a long section, right?
Okay.
So we'll get through what we can get through today,
Right.
but it begins with license application. Okay. Any person, anyone, everyone may apply to the board for a license to cultivate, process, distribute, deliver, or dispense cannabis. Okay. You notice I mentioned several categories here.
Right.
There are several different licenses, categories of licenses.
Right,
This
read
is-
that again, just
Please, yeah.
Any person may apply to the board for a license to cultivate, process, distribute, deliver, or dispense cannabis within the state for sale. Okay? And the rest is kind of boilerplate, but I am going to read it. Such application shall be in writing and verified and shall contain such information as the board shall require. Such application shall be accompanied by a check or draft for the amount required by this article for such license. If the board shall approve the application, it shall issue a license in such form as shall be determined by its rules. Such license shall contain a description of the licensed premise, and in form and in substance shall be a license to the person therein specifically designated to cultivate, process, distribute, deliver, or dispense cannabis in the premises therein specifically licensed. What that means, it's really the first sentence, that any person may apply to the board for, and then it lists the type of the various licenses.
Distribution,
Okay?
cultivation.
There's not much for us to analyze there, other than, it's really, right now it's open, so we are speaking primarily to the social and economic equity applicants as defined by the statute, which is essentially you, okay? Interestingly, from our discussions, you have not really suffered any legal consequences for the sale of marijuana. You have not run afoul of law enforcement because you actually operate in a decent way, and so nobody's coming after you because you're not doing anything wrong.
Absolutely.
You're not doing anything wrong. That's why you have not run So you're a very good candidate.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I practice herbal medicine, and it's not the only thing.
Right,
It's
like
cannabis,
you're
right?
not really a marijuana.
Like, dude, this is the high moment when you pass it to
Yeah,
somebody
just-
who's
No,
not smoking.
and I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I really didn't properly introduce you. You are not a marijuana dealer. You are a holistic practitioner,
Absolutely.
and marijuana is one medicine that
Absolutely.
you work with.
Thank you
You
very
have
much.
a broad spectrum of sages and
Yes.
smudges.
Yes,
You're a graduate from the Culinary Institute of America, which is the most prestigious culinary school
Thank you.
in the country. And one of the most prestigious in the world.
Thank you.
So you make most of the
Zimmerman
edibles
ordained.
that are available. I think I've had enough of that.
we're gonna wonderful.
But you don't make little gummies. You make
Macaroons.
stuff that's worthy of the senators who sponsored this bill. And if we ever have the honor of meeting them, you will make something very special.
Beautiful piece.
Something very special for them.
Yes. The concept of culinary level edibles, and then this thing in our off-camera conversation before we started, a lot of people when they think of edibles, they think of just put it in something so I can get it in me so I can get high.
Right.
But that's the least of what you're talking about. You're talking about the merger of a true culinary experience, world caliber cuisine, and the proper infusion of cannabis. We're not just talking about getting in there to get it high.
So we're not just talking about drinking Mad Dog 2020 to get shit-faced. We're talking about drinking a Chateau Merlot in 1975.
Delicious,
something where there has been real art that has gone into the.
So if I may, to give them a little food for thought, pun intended, that you would take something. Let's say we did something savory. We take a salmon, and if we wanted to add citruses to those salmons, we take a cannabis with an alpha pinene, or we take a cannabis that has these terpenes or these terpenoids that are more sativa. Because sativas are those sweets. They're the highs, the pinenes, the limonene. Those we add into the dish. What that would do is an entourage effect. It gives the person, because a high is not just the psychedelic high we're getting from the saturation from the THC. It's the enjoyment of the experience. So it's creating an experience because life is an experience. You know what I mean? And if you're in life properly with the right dosage of THC, now we're having a true experience. Now we're producing whatever comes after that. Again, is the cream.
Very, very insightful. Bravo. So there's a number of different points under license application. I read point 1 now, going on to point 2. Except as otherwise provided in this article, a separate license shall be required for each facility at which cultivation, processing, distribution, or retail dispensing is conducted. Okay?
That's 4 licenses.
Right. Well, this begs the question of if you are a single operator, such as yourself, or a single business, as we are ultimately going to form, and we want to have various branches of our business, we want to grow, we want to sell, we want to you to do your culinary masterpieces with that. So we essentially are going to need, is that possible? We're going to need more than one license. Is that possible under the statute? The answer is yes. It's spelled out later, the circumstances under which you can do that, the limitations. They are, there's several steps. The point to understand right now is they don't want any single operator to establish market dominance, okay? They don't want you to essentially they don't want
get one license and then say,
or 4 licenses, and now you control 80% of the marketplace. No. So if it's necessary for the type of business plan that we have, yes, it is possible. We'll talk about the mechanics later.
And that's a good distinction, because I remember again in a previous episode where they first alluded to the fact that each license was separate. And there it made it kind of seem, in fact I believe I commented, that it wasn't going to be possible for one business entity to have all 4 licenses. It sounded like they were trying to specifically make those separate. But
I think they were trying to distinguish them one from the other, and make it clear that just because you have one doesn't mean you can essentially do everything.
Exactly. And as you also said, with the eye in mind to prevent that market dominance by the established players in the game who are just going to come in with a boatload of money and try to buy up everything and dominate the market.
Yeah. Now remember, this is coming from wisdom, because California was a madhouse, and they had to they had to destroy and rebuild, I think 3 or 4 times.
Wow. Okay, so actually one thing that we've said a number of times, and I don't think I've ever said to you, is we think New York, in comparison to the other 23 jurisdictions, is it 23 now?
I think it's 23.
23, where it's legal, that New York has done just there's no comparison.
I know.
Like if each of the states were a single person in a final exam at law school, where the fact pattern was they had to draft a Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, and which is essentially what each of these states has done, and you compared New York and you compared them all one to the other, New York is the A++.
That's right.
New York absolutely sets the standard. They balance the various political and economic interests and advance just a thoroughly well thought out piece of legislation, which California simply did not do. And it's evidenced even at the introduction of the legislation. That's all you have to do to really understand the differences is read the introductory pieces. The other jurisdictions, it's like one sentence, like we intend that this ameliorate like the negative effects of marijuana criminalization.
Mm-hmm.
No, New York has like we read
very
this,
specific,
right?
yeah.
Very specific,
Yeah.
very well
Very
organized.
intended.
And it just sets the tone for what follows afterwards. The other states really don't do that. So that
I agree with you. That's why it's that's what
you're saying it was a shit show.
Well,
essentially.
absolutely,
Yeah.
but
in California,
as we were walking towards the MRTA as it looks today, there was a CRTA, and the CRTA was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. The CRTA, they didn't want this. So companies like I'm not even going to mention their names, but bigger corporations that were operating in Canada and in other states wanted it to be straight capitalism monopoly. You can't grow in your house. It was insane.
Okay.
It was insane. And we looked at the CRTA and it was like, well, there's some things that are nice in that. The old MRTA was similar to that, and they were just bogus. But that was them looking around the country and saying, oh man, no way.
Well, actually, and Cornell has talked about this in terms of like business strategy. It's like there's the adopters and
there's the innovators, there's the imitators of the innovators, and there's the imitators of the imitators. The quick example is say social media.
Right.
The innovator was Friendster. That's why to this day, when you connect with someone in Facebook, you're friending them. Then there was the imitator of the innovator. That's the one who usually emerges as successful in the market. The innovator is usually too far ahead of the curve. They don't have the experience to work the things out. And that would have been MySpace. Then you have the imitator of the imitator, which a lot of people don't realize. That's Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay, because they saw the innovator come out and make most of the mistakes, skin their knees and bruise their knuckles and not succeed. Then the imitator of the innovator comes out and says, oh, I see what you're trying to do there. Let me do that. And then the imitator of the imitator comes out and says, that's a good model. Let me one-up that and take it.
And that's what Facebook essentially
Yes.
did, which was like the climax of the evolution of social media, and there has not been a subsequent iteration. So what that means in terms of what we're dealing with right now is it's legal in 23 jurisdictions, less than half. What has to happen is it has to be legalized nationally. I think that New York, not just the legislature, but also the private sector and the public sector, the legislature and the actual marijuana operators should drive that conversation and should do what New York does, which is essentially like we're the home of. I worked on Wall Street for 3 years. I'm not saying Wall Street is really a good thing exactly, but there's a couple of things that New York understands, and that's sales, marketing, and art.
Because we are hot space. We're the melting. We're not even a melting pot. We're the volcano.
Right.
It's not just a melting pot.
So I think that the other states should model their legislation based upon what New York is.
My joke has always been
suggestion.
that there's many metropolises in the world. London, Paris, Sydney, Moscow, Addis Ababa, whatever. But there's only one cosmopolis, and that's New York. If aliens landed on Earth and they had 24 hours to figure out what humanity was about, you'd send them to New York.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you would. Yeah,
Then
you
the
would.
United Nations headquarters or whatever. You wanted
Maybe
to
send them to Queens.
send
Send them to Queens, yeah.
them to Washington Square Park first.
Oh my God.
They'll talk to
Their
you
minds
first,
were
you'll give
blown.
them
You wanted to be coherent enough to get
Oh.
back in the spaceship, so maybe have that be the trip on the way out.
Oh my God, they'd be like, man, that Washington Square Park, good thing we only stayed there for like 5 minutes.
And they tried to jack our spaceship.
Number 3, under license application. Number 3. An applicant shall not be denied a license under this article based solely on a conviction for a violation of Article 220 or Section 240.36 of the Penal Law, and then it spells them out in a little more detail.
Very good.
So what those are, I'm not going to read the rest of that because it's basically saying those are various types of drug offenses. It's worth reviewing in some detail if you've ever faced any type of drug convictions. They're not saying that all drug convictions are expunged or are not a bar, because some drug like cocaine, heroin, stuff like that, it depends. If you have prior convictions that is something that's going to have to be addressed. They lay out very specific ones that are and it's not just cannabis related.
Is it possible you could give us just a brief overview of those specific ones that they mentioned?
I mean, I could name them. I went through them just kind of in a cursory way. Most of it was marijuana.
Okay.
And most of it just seemed like if you've been convicted for any type of marijuana related offense, that's not going to stop you.
It won't absolve you.
But I think even if you've been convicted of like heroin or cocaine, I don't think that that's necessarily going to
it
stop
depends upon the level. If you were operating and selling and distributing, then you're probably still in jail. But
Well, but then I think the legislation would be open to if you can demonstrate that you are operating within the spirit of the statute. They're even saying, remember what I said that on the advisory board?
Yes. There are specific.
You didn't know
specific seats that are specified for prior convicted people.
People that were priorly incarcerated. And the advisory board does a lot more than issue advisory opinions. What it says here, in this section is it seems like if you're just reading this section, that's all they do. Mm-hmm. They make but they also determine how the money gets spent.
Right, and where the equity goes.
Where the equity goes. Yeah. And some of those seats are delegated for the previously
incarcerated. Some are for the Department of Education. Some are going to be for mental health people. Right. They're really
so even if you've done 20 years for a drug, for heroin conspiracy or whatever, I think if you can demonstrate that you're operating within the spirit of the statute,
and specifically, and again, as I said, this is what got me into this conversation, into this business proposition, is that, and again, to the cynics out there who a priori might have felt, we know how this is going to go. It's going to be the rich guys with money who are going to come in from the West Coast and they're going to buy everything up. They are specifying in writing in this legislation that they are making allowances. It's one thing to say, we're not going to let anybody, not be considered because they had a prior conviction. But to put it in the act and say, hey, just so that we're clear, not having having a prior conviction doesn't rule you out, because if the intent truly is to establish social equity and to balance the clear, and that's one of the things I say in the beginning, the clear inequities of the war on drugs and the disproportionate effect that it had on certain classes and shades of people, and that's fine to say like a mea culpa,
right?
But this whole act is saying no, we're deliberately and intentionally looking to redress that.
Right.
I mean, I don't think they could. It could be spelled out in any more clarity or with any more meaning. That's not what I meant. Not clarity, but with any more like actual force and intentionality. Right. It's formerly incarcerated people have to be on that board, making the financial decisions about how the reparations are going to be paid.
That language is healthy because acknowledgement is the first step to our evolution, because the individuals to whom have been incarcerated, they need that opportunity for change. Yes. And if you're leaving out of a space, they're just going to expand the illicit market.
Exactly.
Furthermore, because now you've expanded the illicit market to some degree where there's a huge shadow casted.
Yes.
You're not going to be going out there and looking for cannabis crimes.
Right.
People will be able to operate in an illicit market to some degree, but they shouldn't.
Yes. And that's why two of our taglines, we say out of the gray and into the black.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one, again, this is Sean. He says it's time to blue line the red line.
When what he means by that is, obviously like the redlining that happened during
the war on drugs.
No.
No, that's civil rights. I mean, redlining, redistricting, denial of loans, educational opportunities, housing opportunities. So we're talking really, really, really blue lining the red.
And I said this to you, is that we want to drive the political conversation towards reparations so that the national trend of what has to happen, what the reason, we're gonna digress for a minute, okay?
Sure.
Slavery was a sin. We all know that. Cornell and I have gotten into intense arguments over this subject, but we're we're in agreement that essentially reparations have never been made. I say that everybody is guilty of the sin. I'd say, black people enslaved other black people in Africa and sold them to Europeans. I think the entire planet is responsible. I think it doesn't matter who's responsible. There's a debt debt needs to be paid. Okay, so
Many
let
debts.
us use
Many
the
debts.
marijuana, legalize it. You're shaking your head. What do you disagree with there?
Because you want to talk about something that happened in the early 1600s. That's got nothing to do with what happened in the United States in the 1800s.
Right. That's why I said many debts. That's why I said many.
But
debts.
I'm saying I don't care. Let black people pay the debt.
Sure, as soon as they're paid for the reparations that's due to them.
But I'm
which-
saying but this is what I'm saying is
Right.
that the marijuana operators are the social and economic
Right.
equity applicants. I'm saying what I want you to do is be the one to actually.
So now you're saying what I've been saying about reprieval in this country is how we gain reprieval is, and not just stray away for a second. Thank you for the.
Yeah.
This is the talking stick right here.
Dig it.
You know, we then would give the community that was messed up.
Right.
We're going to give them free education so that they can improve their community actively. And you're saying, well, let's put them in the position so they actively.
I'm driving to a very specific
And-
point.
and-
I'm saying the
and-
criticism of reparations from
Right.
men I respect, like Ben Shapiro, is that it's unpayable.
Right.
That we simply don't have the money. That you can't levy a tax. And I'm saying that now we do.
Yes, the
And we
Evanston,
should
what we
use.
refer to as the
Now we
Evanston,
do.
Illinois.
Oh.
Now we have the money to simply so I don't
see.
whoever's responsible doesn't really matter. The point is that this is like a spiritual debt that needs to be paid. There's a sacrifice that needs to be made in this kind of
It's one of the great sages.
metaphorically in this like Levitical sense, whereas
Indeed.
like
Yeah.
in the Old Testament times they would sacrifice a cow and it would atone for the sins of the
Right.
of the people, and it would essentially pay this karmic debt, right?
Mhm.
So I'm saying there's a karmic debt that needs to be paid,
Right.
and what we need to do. As we're legalizing over the next 5 years,
Yes.
as this trend continues, is drive the conversation towards paying that debt. And I think that the New York statute has done that exactly.
Yes, they've taken the
Okay.
Evanston, Illinois model and they've taken it to the next level.
Right.
And now here's where this is something I say every episode, and now that we have a guest here who'll definitely appreciate it, I'm going to say it again.
Mhm.
The root word of reparations is repair.
Right.
And the obligation, responsibility for the reparations is on us. The government, the system can provide the means and the mechanism to make the repairs. But if all we do is see this as a cash grab for rims and tims and bitches and hoes, that ain't working.
Right.
But that's not okay. Yes, I like the poetry you put with the rims and tims and bitches and hoes. You are absolutely correct. At the same time, y'all are both correct. I believe that once this comes into play in the next 5 years, it just has to be actively, again, like a class, like Brother has said,
Yes,
it has to be a class. And that class holds responsibility. It has a certain
Yes.
narrative and language. And it's separate from what's going on.
Right.
So we have the Cannabis Alliance and communities, but we also have a class in every fucking,
No, we can every once in a
in
while.
every state,
Yeah.
in every
Yes.
state, and how we operate is like we're first of all, like you said, New York has got an amazing bill right now.
Mhm.
So we have a lot of opportunity to show up and show out,
Yeah.
and we're gonna see.
Yeah.
You know,
And it's something you've said, Sean, mostly off camera, is that you see, forget just the specifically MRTA, you see New York as being the one that sets the example
Right.
of how it's done.
Right.
I believe
nationwide.
that as well.
Right, and if they do that, and I also think there's a responsibility for the marijuana operators as a class to
Yes.
essentially like you can't just rely upon the government
Yeah.
to pay the reparations
Right.
fine is what I'm saying.
Right.
That even that yes, the United States government was the one who was responsible. Like
They administered the war on drugs, and the war on drugs was not a war on drugs; it was a war on people.
That's a nuanced statement that I just made because at the same time I'm saying that the New York legislature is doing exactly
Yes.
that, right?
Yes.
But at the same time I'm saying that the responsibility is on the
Yes.
people
It
who
always
are
lies on the people. You're right.
yeah,
Yes.
the responsibility is on the citizens because the government is just us at the end of the day, and we're going to see that when we start reaching out to these guys and talking to Julius Salazar. All of these people are very they're our age, they're from our community, they grew up in the Bronx. They're not like this mystical pie in the sky,
Right.
Kim Jong Un, some cult of no. This
Yeah.
is like Jamal, from the boogie down Bronx.
Yeah.
So let's continue. The next section is actually very important. Okay, Section 62, information to be requested in applications for licenses. Now, ultimately, the board and the Office of Cannabis Management is going to draft essentially the application, which is going to list like specific questions that you have to answer. Do you need a lawyer? Is it complicated? It's probably going to be about as complicated as like applying to college. You know, it's there's going to be a lot of information that you want to include. You will benefit from my being the one to like sit down and gather all the documents and write everything down.
Just as getting a counselor for a college application is probably a good idea.
But what we're going to do,
how to explain your business.
When that time comes, we're going to produce a series on that process, so that anybody, you know, if you can't, could watch that and essentially go through the process themselves. But now it's essentially just going to spell out the general information that we want to start to consider right now, because this is very important. It's not the excuse my French, the bullshit that you say. It's what you're actually doing right now. Okay? If it's rims and tims and bitches and hoes, and that actually is what it is, can you lie on the application and get a license? Maybe. But that's not what I'm saying you should do. I'm saying you should actually be mindful.
But you know, that's like, if you remember from the beginning, you're gonna have to show up annually anyway. You're gonna have to renew your license, and then you're like, all right, well, what are you doing?
Right, but I'm saying now, even before you like, we're going to apply for the license now.
Yeah.
So
and this is something you've been saying even before the license application. You're saying, especially to the class of people out there in the street, start doing the right thing now before you even see an application.
And that's more important
that's the definition of application.
The only thing that the Colorado, we know this because we spoke to these consultancies, but the only thing that the consultancies in Colorado and California are doing for New York operators now is helping them to apply for a license, which I'm saying, well, let's punt on that for the next 18 months in the sense of let's read the statute, be mindful of and do actually what
operate like how the motherfuckers
operate actually how the motherfuckers are telling you to operate.
Yes.
And then when you fill out your application,
hey, guess what?
We've been and you're telling the truth, and you don't have to worry. And you know what? Like I said from the prophet Isaiah, what they're asking you to do is actually what you should be doing anyway.
Make yourself clean.
And what does that do? That gains more confidence and relationship between you and the state, because they're like, wait, so they know when the MRTA came out, and you've been following it since then, and now you're coming to apply. Oh my God!
Yeah, you're not for nothing. You're exactly who we wrote this bill for, and this is exactly the effect we wanted.
And
this
you didn't
bill
wait. Because no American is supposed to wait. You're supposed to do and apply. And
you want to get at the front of the line.
It's a part of our thing. It's part of our culture. You know.
Yes. Take the actions that are going to put you at the head of the line. So you don't have to jump the line. You are there.
Yeah.
So point one is pretty much what I just said, which is I said it's the Office of Cannabis Management, but they say here that the board shall have the authority to prescribe the manner and form in which an application must be submitted to the Office of Cannabis Management for licensure under this article. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being the Office of Cannabis Management that writes but the point is, they're going to give you the form that you have to fill out, okay? Point two, the board is authorized to adopt regulations, this is interesting, including by emergency rule. Do you remember when we talked about that?
Yeah.
And I just totally punted on it because it was a very long and complex section about what they will do under, but now they're saying it again. So now I'm like, what
do they mean by what emergency?
Because they didn't stipulate any type of example of what the emergency would be. They just spelled out this elaborate legal mechanism around which the office and board can implement like emergency rules. I don't know what are they talking about, a zombie apocalypse? What are they talking about?
Are they saying you become essential?
I don't know what they're saying. So it's occurring a second time. So now I'm noticing it. Okay. All right.
Shared my interest now.
So the board is authorized to adopt regulations, including by emergency rule, establishing information which must be included on an application for licensure under this article. Such information may include, but is not limited to, information about the applicant's identity, obviously, including racial and ethnic diversity. So we got some interesting diversity in our company, because I'm not exactly thing I always resent about racial discussions and white privilege is because when I talk to, forgive me for saying, when I talk to black people, I get lumped into, like, I'm a white person, okay? But when I'm with the white people, I'm not actually really in the club because my father was a Jew, first of all, and I'm just one kinky white bastard. So I'm really not, and my mother was Irish, Black Irish and Italian.
So you're too white for the blacks, too black for the whites.
You know, so
that's interesting.
And and the Irish and the Sicilians are, let's face it, they're kind of the.
And here's the thing, to your specific point.
You know,
going back to early 20th century. Wow, if you have just
no wops allowed.
Oh no! Now just Google some of the caricature
right.
cartoons they had in the press about the Irish.
Right.
Oh my God.
So all right, but right. So but the point is, we're an ethnically diverse company, right? And that's what they're trying to promote, and
yes. That's what they're leaving opportunity for, or leading with.
So, but the thing that I don't like about the racial discussion is I have no peoples. You know, so y'all who want to play that game can all go fuck yourselves. You know, anyway. I don't like the discussion.
So now, you know,
I don't like the discussion of race at all.
I call cannabis a gateway drug for only one reason.
Why is that?
Because it's a gateway to community.
Okay.
Well, actually, you're right though, because one of the reasons why they criminalized it in the first place was because there was too much class intermingling between, so they had to put a stop to that.
Right,
you know,
right.
We can't have our white daughters listening to that funky music.
To that
you know what I mean?
Music, right.
Because next thing you know, right. So, but we're an
we gotta open it up.
But ethnic diversity is actually woven into the fabric of the statute, and you know we're on pretty solid ground here. You know,
Indeed.
Okay. So ethnic diversity, ownership and investment information, including the corporate structure, which implies, again, like we've been saying, that you want to incorporate. Like one of the major things I'm telling the street operator, I'm telling you, is we have to incorporate as soon as possible to have the corporate identity.
Yeah. This country was founded by 13 corporations.
Right.
The colony was not a political distinction. It was an economic distinction.
Right, it was.
Evidence of good moral character. There's one footnote that I would like to say there. Okay. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none who understands. There is none who seeks after God. They have all turned aside. They have together become unprofitable. There is none who does good, no, not one. Their throat is an open tomb. With their tongues they have practiced deceit. The poison of asps is under their lips, whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Destruction and misery are in their ways, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. So, that being said, but here's the thing, right? Evidence of good moral character.
That's heavy.
But who is? We all fall short of that. Period. End of story. You fall short of that. As far as wisdom goes, I fall. Well, no. As far as when they really examine us, like we're gonna talk about who we are. I've been arrested a few times. Yeah. As have I. I've been arrested. We don't have to get into that right now. But the point is that what I want to say is that. Evidence of good moral character is what have you done? What have you done for me lately? Yes. Saith the Lord. You know, like what have you done today? What are you doing in the next 18 months? So to the extent that wash yourselves, make yourselves clean. To the extent that you've fallen short to the extent that if you have to ask yourself that question right now, and you don't like what you would have to lie on the application. Don't lie on the application. You know what? Now's the time to have a new...
Two of the things that you recommend, Sean. One is that you recommend the street vendors incorporate. What's the other thing that you recommend that they do specific to this very point right here? That they take 10% of their...
Excuse... Well, we're going to actually... I was going to wait for that.
Okay.
Wait for it, because that's spelled out. They're going to ask you for what have... Like, they're going to say... They spell that out in explicit detail.
Okay.
We may or may not get to it today, depending on how far we get.
We'll save that for the approval.
But they actually... and it's not just about money. Okay, because
Yeah.
the easiest way to like what I'm saying. Excuse me. You should finish that.
No, well, basically, one of the things that Sean recommends is that they take at least 10% of their profits and they make charitable donations.
And you get 90% of that back, or 10%, or we figure it out.
Yeah.
I actually think it might even be closer to what you would be paying in taxes. Could you get, if you make a charitable contribution of $100 to a church or a food pantry, you get 90% of that back as a tax credit at the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And to your point about what reparations truly are, is you're saying it's not simply the government saying we're going to take 40-50% of the tax revenue, we're going to give everything. It's like, okay, so you out here on the street now legally selling weed, what are you doing to make reparations?
right, exactly.
You know, and if part of that is you take your profit and you contribute to your community,
Right.
then that's, it's not a one layer thing.
Right. But they actually want to see even more than that, I think. It's not just about money. Because the statute it spells out how they're going to collect taxes and how they're going to, distribute that into, what did they call it? The
that's their
Urban
responsibility as well.
Redevelopment Fund or something.
Right.
They, that's what they're, and that's going to have billions of dollars.
So we're saying it's a collective responsibility that on both ends we should be contributing, and then that's where we'll see true change.
Well,
that's the optimism
what I'm saying is that you have to be
Ideally.
doing things other than making charitable contributions. How else have you been participating in the community? I'll tell you one way that I do it. I'm not, I volunteer in the food pantry across the street from my house. Well, I become friends with them, but that's not. I'm not giving them money.
Right.
I don't have money to give them right now.
You know what?
But I volunteer my time.
You know what really makes sense for someone who's coming into this industry is to use what their talent and strength is, because you can definitely give that back.
Yes.
And you could put your money behind that to make that something where
Yes.
not only you're giving your back your wisdom, but you're giving them back something in a tangible.
Yes.
So you're creating classes. You're
Right, giving them something tangible, not money.
Yeah.
Like what are, it's like if you're applying for college, they ask you, what are your activities,
And
right?
that's why the extracurricular activities
like,
are always
and
stressed.
I mentioned the food pantry. You're silent. I expected you to chime in, but I know there's so many different community involvements.
Yes,
that you
yes,
have. The
yes.
Harlem Business Alliance.
Yes, and more important, more to that is, as we talked again off camera before we started, for 7 years I worked with Operation Hope, a not-for-profit that started in '92 after the Rodney King riots, and specifically they have a 12-week entrepreneurial training program. And I ended up being the lead presenter for the first of those 12 sessions. I also attended all the graduations and sometimes taught some of the sessions in between. Now again, I worked with Operation Hope, I did not work for them. So all of that was stuff, I was just giving them of my time and experience as someone who in 2010 had to be what I call an accidental entrepreneur, which was, the subprime mortgage meltdown, melted down my last full-time job. And, after shopping out my resume and getting 4 job offers that wanted me to, in addition to being IT manager, which is what I was, they wanted me to be network administrator and database administrator and help desk operator for 80% of what I made just for being IT manager. And I was like, not for nothing, if you're going to work me like my name is Toby, I got to be the hand holding the whip. And that's why I started a business. And it was partially self-promotional, but as you're saying, the more that I learned from experience, that's why I did what I did. Because it's like, okay, I might just be a couple of steps ahead of the path than you are, but that's my giving back.
But what did you do? Harlem Business Alliance. What's the other?
Operation Hope.
Operation Hope.
Yes. I also
great definitions.
There's been a number of different
contribution.
nonprofits and community involvement.
I worked with CUNY. I did some workshops.
Not just throwing
the
money
global.
in places, being.
What are you doing that's not necessarily profit motivated to engage and develop the community? When's the last time you really thought? When's the last time we have really thought about that? That's essentially what they're asking for here. And those of us who can give an explanation of that will be prioritized for.
And also now I'm speaking to those of you out here who are watching this, to whom we're aiming at this. This is strategy that we're talking here. Because the goal of watching this series is ultimately when they start giving out those licenses, you want to get a license. So here's what we're saying to you. Again, it's not just about throwing money at it, because there's a term for that. It's called greenwashing. And large corporations do it all the time. Oh, look at us making a donation to the Ben Boys and Girls Club. And while we're polluting the ocean.
Right, exactly.
But strategically, this is something you can do. You don't have a lot of money, you got time.
Right.
You've got abilities, as Brother Saint here says, you've got talents and you've got things that you can contribute to the community that doesn't have to be measured in dollars and cents. First of all, do that anyway, because that's just better for you and better for your soul and better for the community.
Right.
But it's also going to be better for you when it comes time to fill out that application, and you're not trying to make up some stuff like the college kid on the college application, trying to pretend, trying to write that essay, for
Just
300 words.
yeah.
They got 30 words worth of stuff.
Let your passion be true.
Exactly.
Let your
Thank
passion
you.
be true.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
that only starts from working at it, listening to a man like him, listening to a man like him, getting your mind right so you can apply it.
And then do something.
Yes.
Do something. Like I said, I've it's a few hours of my time in the food pantry. It's a church. They're very religious people. I'm not, but we have developed a friendship. It's a good way for me to spend my time. They don't give me any money. I don't get anything in return, but it's a lot better than just sitting in the apartment thinking about how I can advance my own interests. My own.
Not to interject,
Yeah.
I know you're about to continue, but that's see today's Sunday, by the
Yes.
way. Usually on Sundays, I'm in Prospect Park with the drum circle doing Sanctuary Sunday, free meditation.
That's what I'm talking about.
Giving
Okay,
it
that's exactly what I'm talking
Giving
about.
people understanding, because meditation is something that's got to be a daily thing, but that's another day.
But this is a way you're engaging the community
Right.
in a spiritual practice, engaging art.
Right.
It's
Burning
not like
herbs,
some.
burning CBD in the air, teaching them why burning CBD is great for in your space. It's antimicrobial and giving them vibes. Don't just give them the spiritual science of it, but give them some actual science behind it. It's all connected.
And the experience, you're and
And then talking about science, I was just when you were breaking down the whole, if you wanted to, infuse the salmon with a little sweetener, and I'm like, okay, this brother's getting down to some chemistry, and I'm a pretty smart guy, but I'm sitting here like, I'm gonna have to look that shit up after.
Oh yeah.
Who's the
Terpenes are big.
the terpenes?
Oh, yeah.
any
Terpenes
type
are
of
big.
community engagement around educating on the subject of marijuana is going to be looked upon favorably
Absolutely.
by the board and the office.
Absolutely.
Okay. Evidence of good moral character, including the submission of fingerprints by the applicant to the Division of Criminal Justice Services, information about the
Background
premises.
checks,
Right. Background check. This is obvious, right?
Yeah.
Information about the premises to be licensed, financial statements. Ooh, that's a scary one. Like how how organized are is your accounting right now?
It's okay.
Really? You have some accounting?
I have my receipts of everything that I purchased.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? No, but see that. How many?
I used to do my taxes from when I was a kid, man. Like I'm not. My grandma worked for H&R Block, and I was just paying attention to her. And
Thanks.
she's OG H&R Block.
I'm so happy to hear that because we haven't really
Bro,
haven't had a discussion about that. But I'm thinking like, yo, when I look under this company's hood,
right? Exactly. Am I gonna
It's
see
gonna be
like,
big.
yo?
It's gonna be.
Why is there-
shoebox full of
And I'm
scraps.
gonna have
Miles
to
right.
explain to this guy that he needs to do
No, of course.
exactly what you're doing. I'm like, when I tell this man
yeah.
that he needs to start saving his receipts,
Yeah.
he's
Right.
never going to answer my phone calls ever again.
It's for me.
Yeah.
It's like, so at some point I wasn't. When I began, I was buying a lot and then not really marking how much profit I'm truly making, aside from the purchase, the collectiveness, and creating the value of what I'm making and
Right.
what it costs.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I
The
knew
COBD,
it. I
the
knew
cost
it.
of
So
doing
I would
business. Yeah.
make. I have it in my mind, but you'd be that black and white.
And not for nothing, not to give away too much of the company's secret, Sean, but that's another thing that in our preliminary conversation before we even started this podcast series, when you were talking about going out and I guess basically evangelizing to the street vendors out there, basically the three things, and it's on the Cannabpreneur with a B, Cannabpreneur.com. That's the website. Check it out.
That's right.
One of the things that you're saying is basically incorporation. Works with the business structure. The charitable donations and financial management. How many people out there that are doing this are cash and carry? They couldn't tell you how much money they spent in the past week, much less in the past year.
Right.
And in order to get into this legitimate system, you're going to have to run a legitimate business. This
Most
has
important
nothing
part.
to do with about it being the distribution of
Right.
cannabis. This is any kind of business.
Right.
If you're going to be a true entrepreneur, you're going to have to manage your financials.
And I'll chime in. It's not even about how freaking talented you are at something. Because I'm very talented, and I know a lot of brothers and sisters that are talented, but the organization has to be 360 degrees.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear you say that. I thought
See.
that was going to be a lot more complicated. So good. But it's going to be hard for a lot of people.
Yes.
Yeah, well, of course.
That's why they're going to need us.
Okay. And any other information prescribed by
But not
regulation?
impossible.
That's just
Yeah.
no. But it's to go through that transformation. It's what I said. It's like if you're willing and obedient, you'll be able. If you can go through that transformation, you will take a piece of this multi-billion-dollar a year marketplace. If you don't, you will be excluded from it.
Yeah.
Hey, if it was easy, everybody would be a successful business already.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay.
And you could be a business, and you could be successful daily in the business.
But it's time to start thinking about basic accounting principles and
Right.
talk to an accountant and watch some videos on YouTube and just start thinking about accounting and keeping proper business financial records.
Yes.
Okay. And then number 3, all license applications shall be signed by the applicant if an individual, by a managing member, if a limited liability company, by an officer if a corporation, or by all partners if a partnership. Each person signing such application shall verify or affirm it as true under the penalties of perjury. Why is that relevant? I don't think either of you are going to really answer that question for me.
Actually, read that again.
I'm going to read this again because this is very relevant, but probably not for the reasons that are immediately apparent. All license applications shall be signed by the applicant if an individual, by a managing member if a limited liability company, by an officer if a corporation, or by all partners if a partnership. Each person signing such application shall verify or affirm it as true under the penalties of perjury. Why is that important?
I know why.
Why? Why?
Because you're paying taxes, you're operating a business, and the things that you're saying, if you say, oh, well, we make this much and you make more than you do, that's evasion.
What do you think, Reno?
I say in addition to that, it's also to prevent illegal opportunities using this organization as a front.
Well, true. That's all true. But the reason why it's relevant to us right now, to me, okay, why? And I couldn't expect you to appreciate this subtlety.
Right.
But this was actually when I read this.
Right.
This was very relevant to me because as I'm thinking, how should we incorporate? What should we do?
Oh, you're saying in terms of the distinctions of the various.
Yeah, well, this lists all the various ways you can essentially go about doing business with the state. You can not incorporate. I told you should incorporate, but you actually don't have to. Okay, you actually don't have to. If you wanted to, but if you want to hire a staff, if you want to, if you want to manage a multi-million-dollar a year business, you should incorporate because you basically need. It's going to be more than just you.
Brings you to the avenue. Yeah.
It's going to be more than just you. It brings you to a place where you can, essentially do all those things that you need to do.
And also, now that I see the gist of your question, and as the business guy in the conversation, I heard them say individual and partnership, and I'm like, nix either of those, because I don't recommend any of the entrepreneurs I talk about being a sole proprietorship or a partnership.
Okay.
The LL in
Why?
LLC stands for limited liability.
Right.
And also that's the same that happens with an incorporation.
Yes.
If you are an individual or if you are a partnership and you get sued, you are liable for everything you own.
Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you.
That's
Okay?
right.
A limited liability corporation, that's what the LL means.
S
You are only
corporation.
liable for what
C
the
corporation.
company is worth. All your private stuff, that's not up for grabs.
That's
Right. So
And
I'm,
also, in terms of, as you're saying, so let's say you never get sued. Just in terms of proper structure and management of a business, you want to be in it. And when I hear incorporation, I include both LLCs and Class C and S corporations in all of that. That's just a not operating privately out of your own bank account sort of thing.
but it's going to be interesting to see what corporate structure most marijuana businesses ultimately end up operating.
I think honestly, a lot of them are going to be, the first and they're going to be private owned or they're going to be partnerships. My personal recommendation would be that they be LLCs.
And that's probably what we're going to do. But
Yeah.
should it be like?
That's what we
but I
should
but
do,
I
but-
have to really think about kind of what language how. It's not a simple
Yeah.
question.
And the thing is, even not to belabor this point too
Yeah.
much, but even say if you're going to be an individual, then in that case they should get a DBA, a doing business as,
Yes.
and they should represent themselves as don't make out the checks to Cornell Green,
Right.
make out the checks to the Dread Cannabpreneur or somebody like that,
Right.
even as a business entity. even if you're not going to do any of the paperwork to limit your liability or something.
Right.
Still, so this way you can, first of all, since you can get a business credit card so that people are going to take you seriously as a credit, so you can invoice for things and all of that. But we can have separate, and we will have separate
Make purchases
episodes
with the tax ID.
Exactly.
All right, so but it spells out the various types of corporate entities, right? So number 4, all license or permit applications shall be accompanied by a check draft or other forms of payment as the board may require or authorize in the amount required by this article for such license or permit. We don't know how much they're going to cost, but they are bending and you're going to see in subsequent sections, they're bending over backwards for the social and economic equity applicants, so they might just like waive that for,
Because that in the previous episode, it was actually a bit surprised when they mentioned that it was going to be a sliding scale.
And they go into more detail in
I
subsequent.
believe they did that in Massachusetts.
Is that right?
They waived a lot for
The social and economic equity.
they
applicants.
did. Yeah.
And I think that's going to end up happening here as well because they just want you to apply. They're like, please,
Let's get this money going.
just because they want you to pay their taxes and they don't want to have to hunt you down.
Right.
They just want you to be voluntary about it. So
Because the whole point of this is to collect the taxes revenue so that they can distribute it equitably. And also to my cynics out there, again, I'm not trying to drag HBA. I love and respect you guys very much, but to that article, again, this was, not having read the bill, a reasonable assumption and a reasonable skepticism. Well, they're going to make the fees for the licenses just ridiculous and then they were basing this on the precedent of what they knew, which is what the licenses were to get a medical marijuana license, and that's like a 6-figure thing. And they're like, come on, who's going to be able? But specifically, what the MRT is saying, nah, we're not going to price it like that. That might have been what was done before.
Right.
But specifically, since this is about social equity and balancing the inequities, we're addressing that issue.
and plus the money they're going to make from the license applications is nothing, and that's a biannual thing. I thought it was a one-time thing, and then I realized it's a biannual thing. So it is a reoccurring source of revenue, but it's not.
I remember they said that was just in one of the sections. They said that the costs are going to be such that it covers the administrative cost of running the board and the advisory board. So it's not, that's not looking to be a profit center. That says, look, we got to pay people.
Right,
we
exactly. Exactly.
That's all we're trying.
That doesn't even go towards the community reinvestment funds. That just goes towards managing the office.
That's just to cover the overhead.
Right,
That's why there's so
exactly.
many specifics behind, and what you're saying, why there needs to be more specifics behind creating equity beyond. Like, so when we profit, we're putting our 10%. They're putting their 10%.
Right.
Well, yeah, okay. That's an interesting question in terms of how the marijuana operator should direct the charitable contributions, because you don't want to be competitive with the statute.
We discussed that before.
So what should, and I'm saying what it'd be a good thing to invest in things that are not really spelled out directly. And one thing would be the arts. Because there's nothing in the statute about the arts.
Because they're addressing housing, they're addressing training, they're addressing mental health, they're addressing education,
housing, jobs.
So they're not addressing. So exactly, that's a very great point, both of you. It's like, so let us cover the part that's not being covered.
Right, and that's what we want to do with the 5 Boroughs Social Equity Alliance. Is we want to have essentially a fund that artists can apply for grants from, so that we can invest in the, because one thing that Cornell and I keep talking about is equity, and as something that has like actual value. What does New York have? What does New York produce? We're not producing like goods and grain.
It's not a big manufacturing state.
It's not a manufacturing state, but what we do have is art. And if we invest into the art community, there's going to be a huge return on that investment.
And just a little brief aside, we were talking about Wu-Tang earlier.
Indeed.
I was looking at, after I watched that we're talking about that of Mice and Men, the documentary. So that made me just say, I wonder. First of all, I wanted to see the 5 borough distribution of how many hip hops, and then that led me to an article of the top 100 platinum albums in hip hop. Over half of them are from New York.
Yeah.
And the closest state doesn't even come to
make hip hop great again.
Again, we're going back to art.
Yes.
Yes.
That's why I mentioned that.
Art is so valuable. It's
Well,
caviar.
but it's interesting because one thing I said in the beginning of the series is like, with marijuana and the legalization of marijuana, we're going back to like cash crops.
Yes.
We're going back to but at the same time, we're also talking about how to invest that money into something that's that's a little more abstract, like art, right?
Yes.
That's not a cash crop, you know. But it is a thing that it's a substance and it has a value.
It's,
you know?
as they say, it's fungible.
Yeah, right.
Right.
You know, you can grow value out of it.
Right, exactly. Okay, so if there are any proposed changes after the filing of the application or the granting of a license or a permit, and any of the facts required to be set forth in such application, a supplemental statement giving notice of such proposed change, cost, and source of money involved in the change, duly verified or affirmed, shall be filed with the board at least 30 days prior to such proposed change. Failure to do so shall, if willful and deliberate, be cause for denial or revocation of the license. If we take on more partners,
Right.
if we do anything, if we go in any kind of direction different from what we originally spell out, that
Don't try to
has,
slide anything under the radar, basically.
you can't, it's like they are giving themselves a lot of power here.
Yes, they are.
You
Yes, they
know,
are.
but I'm inclined to just give them the benefit of the doubt, actually, because I think they thought it through, and if that's what they're saying, then fine. So if you're going to propose any major corporate change, you have to get their permission.
Yeah, and
first.
again, here's why we want the cynics out
Let's
there
see how
to stay
difficult-
cynical.
Yeah.
Hold
Yeah.
their feet to the fire. It sounds good in intention, but like you say, what do they mean by emergency?
Well, what if they
Right,
do? Well,
right,
and also if
right.
they do, if they then turn around and say you can't like make reasonable changes, then we'll scream
Exactly.
bloody murder
Exactly.
and hold them to account.
Yeah.
That which is why we need to come together for the purposes of
yeah,
collective
we
bargaining.
Yeah, we need
You
the
mess
class.
with one of us, you mess with all of us.
Yes,
That's right.
And we
That's
need
right.
the cynics out there because this isn't a kumbaya, circle jerk here.
This is a
This
union.
is reality, and we need to take it like a skeptical sort of like, okay, I'll take you at your word, but I'm watching you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering if I should read this whole
That's a
section.
lot. That could be a lot of power.
Well, we've gone on for a bit of a while.
You
Is
wanna-
there a natural break in?
Well, yes, because we're listing all the points under, and we're almost done. So we're on point 6 under section 62, which is the information. So let's finish
Yeah,
this section, and then
exactly.
we're going to put a pin in it after
Okay.
after that. But in giving any notice, taking any action in reference to a registered organization or license of a licensed premise, the board may rely upon the information furnished in such application and in any supplemental statement connected therewith, and such information may be presumed to be correct and shall be binding upon registered organizations, licensee, or licensed premises as if correct. All information required to be furnished in such application or supplemental statements shall be deemed material in any prosecution for perjury.
Yeah, I knew that's what you were
This is why I was
knew
wondering
you
if
were
I
gonna
should
lose
read
it.
this whole thing.
No, go ahead.
Any proceeding to revoke, cancel, or suspend any license, and in the board's final determination to approve or deny the license. All that means is that we're going to hold you to what you
Right,
say.
you better double check before you put it in writing.
And if you put that in writing and give it to us, we will call. If it's not true,
I'm gonna call you on
it's perjury.
It's
There are
perjury.
consequences.
There's fines for that, yeah.
So it's basically don't lie to us.
Yeah.
That's all. Which dovetails with what I'm saying about do the right thing
Yeah.
in the next 18
Yeah,
months.
yeah.
and
that's
get
why
back to
you
the
got-
radical
yeah.
transparency.
Right. Okay.
That's why that Isaiah
7. But
passage was like,
this
was
is.
so
But
powerful.
you know how I just said they're going to waive it. So listen to this. They waive the fee for the social and economic equity applicants. The board may number 7. The board may waive the submission of. I'm sorry. This isn't the fee. I made a
okay.
mistake. I think it's a subsequent section that says that.
Okay,
I just
okay.
got ahead of myself. The board may waive the submission of non-material information or documentation described in this section, the waiver of which would not be inconsistent with the purposes and goals set forth in this article for any category of license or permit, provided that it shall not be permitted to waive the requirement for submission of any such category of information solely for an individual applicant or applicants. Do either of you have any idea what that
You're gonna have to
means?
read that again because that was a whole lot of waves.
That's just-
and,
It's just 2 more sections.
What, like this?
But
It was like,
that okay.
it was like,
I don't.
nope.
I don't know what this means.
One more
But
time.
this
Yeah,
is
try
what
it.
you have. This is an exegesis, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
when you're in law school and you read this shit, excuse me, you sit down with your friends and you figure out
Yeah.
what the
You know what the hell that
expletive
meant?
it means. And you go after you go through 3 years of this process. you're a lawyer. Okay, so we're not going to do that across section, but we are going to do it this one time.
Yeah, let's try that one more time.
The board may waive the submission of non-material information or documentation described in this section.
Okay.
The waiver of which would not be inconsistent with the purposes and goals set forth in this article.
Okay.
So they can waive it,
Right.
and they're not being hypocrites by
Right.
doing so.
Right. Okay.
For any category of license or permit,
Right.
distribution, any of the four types, provided that it shall not be permitted to waive the requirement for submission of any such category of information solely for an individual applicant or applicant. So now I understand.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
Basically, they're saying stuff that isn't really essential, and then if we were to call you to the mat for perjury, wouldn't matter. We can waive that. However, no special interest. It's not like, oh, everybody else has to file this, but you one of our boys, so we'll let you slide.
Right, exactly. Thank you. That's what that means.
But
And
it
it's
did take a
just, but
second
we
reading.
we did what we said we were going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Number 8, the board, and this is the last point under this, and we went into a lot of, I think, extraneous, well, not extraneous, perhaps essential commentary, but we provided
Indeed.
a lot of commentary but we only read 2 sections in
Okay.
and it's a long,
Yeah.
it's a long article, like I said. So, the board, pursuant to regulation, may wholly prohibit and or prescribe specific criteria under which it will consider and allow limited transfers or changes of ownership, interest, or control during the registration or license application period and up to 2 years after an approved applicant commences licensed activities. I'm not that concerned with this personally, because I'm saying maybe I should be concerned with it. If you wanted to contemplate taking on another partner or changing the corporate structure in any way, after you've incorporated and after you've submitted that information to the state, you're limited in terms of what you can do.
Yeah.
Right, but if you've been somehow you said operated for like 2 years, what?
Well,
Actually, read that again, because I'm wondering if
The
I
board
remember.
pursuant to regulations, so the board pursuant to the rules that it
Right,
ultimately
that we're
spells
talking
out in more detail may wholly prohibit, stop, and or prescribe specific criteria under which it will consider and allow limited transfers or changes of ownership, interest, or control during the registration or license application period and or up to 2 years after the an approved applicant commences license activities.
So they're
once
saying
you
you got yay or nay powers. We can say no, can't make a change, or we can say, all right, under these particular circumstances, you can transfer or you
But
can modify.
here's what you can't do. You get approved for a license, and now all these people in Colorado are saying, "Yo," they're saying to you, "What let's partner, let's go," and I'm offering you, "Oh, you can't do that.
Right.
You can't
Right.
do that.
Right.
You won't be able to." They're essentially.
That's got to be in your model.
But actually, it's interesting. I think the reason why they put that there is under what's called the parens patriae doctrine of state authority, which basically says the state sometimes plays the role of parent. And but here's the thing. The reason why they're saying you're not going to be able to change ownership, I think, is to protect the social and economic equity applicants from being essentially bought out.
Because otherwise, you can get people who qualify, and then some shadow partner comes in and
takes it from you. So
some
some bigger corporation says, okay, you know what, dude, you've done a good job. Here's here's $1 million, or here's $500,000, and I just. You're like, what? Let me just take that and get out of the marijuana
business. And
you
you
don't
don't
see that you're gonna make 3, 4, 5 times that in the next year.
So they're basically saying, like, if you hold our hand, these 22. It's the government here is the 22 sponsors of this bill. I think that's the way I see it. Ultimately, it's the board and it's the Office of Cannabis Management, and there's a lot of moving parts.
Which is all TBD, because none of that exists.
Because none of that exists yet. But right now, the government is the 22 sponsors of this bill.
Yeah.
And they're saying, hold up, do what we're saying here. Trust us a little bit. And we're not even going to let you sell your equity to someone for undervalue. I think that's why that section is there. With that, we're gonna put a
That's
pin in it. I think we had a good conversation. I mean,
Yeah, that was excellent.
we didn't get through as much of the statute as I wanted to, but we did explore the sections that we explored in pretty high resolution.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
And
So-
thank you so much, my brother, for stopping by. And
Thank
you
you.
really added great value and insight to this. And if you'd like to come back as we go further into this, man, I'd love to have you back.
Hey,
I
anytime
think
you guys want me
I mean I
back,
think
man.
we might go finish this section. We'll
Yeah,
see.
well, yeah.
We're gonna talk about that TBD. But this was a good episode.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody who listened.
And we'll see you all next episode.